Welcome back to Real Shift, where we like to talk real shit all day, every day, all for the love of movies. I am Joe. Before I get into it, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Any little bit of feedback or support would be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, I'm going to get right into it because today, as I record this video, it is the 20-year anniversary of X-Men, the very first movie in the X-Men Fox franchise. And I wanted to get into, for a minute here, exactly why I think this movie still holds up, why I like it, a few reasons why, without going into a full review. And I wanted to talk about why I think modern superhero movies could learn a lot from this movie. And I'll get into exactly what I mean by that. But before I do that, I want to take you back to 2000 when, if you were anything like me, you were super excited for this movie. Obviously, I was a big fan of the comics. I was a big fan of the X-Men TV series, the cartoon, still am, and I was super excited to see that on the big screen. I mean, I was expecting to see the X-Men as I knew them on the big screen, and I'm the first one to admit that's not exactly what we got. We got a different interpretation. Now, I want you guys to pay attention to the word interpretation, because that is pretty much the whole purpose of this video. It's about interpretation, and that's something that I want to beat home in this movie, or in this video for sure. So I didn't get a direct adaptation of the TV series. I didn't get a direct adaptation of the comic book. I got Bryan Singer and Fox's version of the X-Men. Now, a lot of people might not like that. A lot of people still don't like that to this day. But in my personal opinion, that's why this franchise was able to last as long as it did. We got a 20-year franchise out of this one movie, and it's because this X-Men set itself apart from the other X-Men. At least that's how I see it. And I'm not just talking about the edgy black suits. It's a little bit more than that. They were able to take these characters, and yes, they're still recognizable. Yes, they're still who we like from the comic books, but they were able to mold them and mold the whole story and mold the whole team and everything that goes on, the whole X-Men world with mutants and all the politics and everything. They were able to mold that into something that is more appealing cinematically, because not everything that is on the page necessarily is going to work cinematically, and that's been proven time and time again in Hollywood. So I kind of commend them for that, for taking some liberties, but also having a vision and executing it, and not being afraid to take those liberties. And in my personal opinion, it paid off. A few other reasons why I like X-Men 2000 before I go on. I'd definitely say it's perfectly cast. Everyone from Hugh Jackman to Ian McKellen to Patrick Stewart. I think they all embodied these cinematic versions of these characters. Specifically Hugh Jackman. And there was a time, I remember specifically, when people were upset about Hugh Jackman being cast as Wolverine. They didn't see him in the role. He was kind of unknown at the time. I mean, he had done small things, I think, but he wasn't very well known, and people were kind of like, he doesn't seem like Wolverine to me. He seems kind of small. He seems this, he seems that. Everything, you know, just, it's the same as with any comic book character. There's always going to be backlash to the casting. But what Hugh Jackman did, and Bryan Singer for that matter, is they took the character of Wolverine. Now, the cinematic version of Wolverine didn't always look like the comic book version. He didn't always act like the comic book version. Sometimes he didn't act like him at all. Sometimes he was just a regular guy with Wolverine hair and claws, if you know what I'm getting at. So, and then sometimes they pulled stuff right out of the book and put it right on the screen. So there was a kind of this mixture, and it did create kind of like this weird, I guess you could say, combination of different versions of Wolverine, I guess you could say. But ultimately, it was Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Like, he made that role his own. He took the character of Wolverine, and now you can't see anyone else in the role. Like, he is Wolverine to most people. Disney owns them now, and they're probably going to recast Wolverine, but I don't think anybody really wants that, because Hugh Jackman did such a phenomenal job for 20-some years, and that's why a movie like Logan works so well, is because we got that proper send-off for this character that we've been with for 20 years, and it was an emotional payoff, and they knew just the right strings to pull with the fans, and that Wolverine was put to rest. He had his peaceful moment. He was finally able to rest in peace, essentially. And that is something that the cinematic version of the character struggled with for 20 some years, like just constantly dealing with his rage, or dealing with his origins, or trying to figure out why he is the way he is, or where he came from, or why they did this to him, and the people that he lost along the way. All of that is just kind of created this character that is now going to stand the test of time and is going to be in our minds forever. Like, no one can think of Wolverine now without thinking of the Hugh Jackman version of the character. Like, he's up there with the comic version of the Wolverine now, or the TV show version of the Wolverine. Like, he made his own Wolverine character iconic, and I think that's something that is not necessarily accomplished in modern cinema anymore. The other things that I kind of like about it is that this was a trailblazer for the ensemble superhero movie. Now, that's been done to death at this point, and it's almost to the point now where I don't even want to see it anymore. But this was the blueprint for it, to be able to take many characters like this. And this is without origin stories. This is without individual movies leading up to it. They went right into a team-up scenario, and they had to introduce so many characters in a short amount of time. And in my personal opinion, they did a really good job with doing that. Like, that's not easy to do, but they pulled it off, and they have to be commended for that as well. And you have to take into consideration also that a lot of these ensemble superhero movies wouldn't exist with this movie. I think this movie definitely set the precedent in that aspect. I mean, this movie was essentially responsible for the superhero movie renaissance, along with Blade also. Like, these two movies essentially were what started that renaissance and what got people interested in the comic book movie again. Of course, followed by Raimi's Spider-Man after that, but it was a time when these movies, in my personal opinion, they were more spread out. They didn't come out 2 or 3 times a year like they do now. They were more of an event back then. It was something that you could really get excited for because there was time in between them, and you got a chance to process each one, and you didn't have another one to follow it up right after you watched the one before it. So that's important. All those things, I think, allow people to absorb. Like, you don't get a chance to absorb movies like that anymore. Like, they're just, before these movies are out, they're already filming the sequel half the time. That's not the way it should be done. They should have a vision, and they should have this long drawn out plan, and they should execute it over so many years and not rush anything, and just do it to the best of their ability. And that's something that I think that the X-Men franchise did really well. And it all started with this movie here in 2000. So my basic gist of what I'm trying to say here, and this was inspired today by a post on the Oscars, the Academy. They made a post about the X-Men and the 20-year history of the franchise and how they've been nominated for an Oscar twice. And a lot of people took issue with that. I don't take issue with that because these aren't Oscar movies necessarily. These are crowd pleasers, but they can also have this element of rewatchability and give you the impression that you need to watch it again to catch something else. And that's something that keeps me coming back to these types of movies, is that there's always something new that I can take from it if I go back to it. A lot of times when I watch modern movies, I watch it and I absorb it. It is what it is, and then I move on, and then I don't have a desire to watch it again. So that's also something that's missing from the modern movies, especially the modern superhero movies. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we need to encourage Hollywood to give us interpretations of these characters. I think this is the next evolution of superhero movies. And I think Joker is a good example of it, that came out last year. There's a few good examples. I think Tim Burton's Batman 89 is a good example. I think the X-Men movies are a good example. I think Raimi's Spider-Man's a good example. I think the Dark Knight trilogy is a good example. And what all those movies have in common is they are not direct adaptations from the comic book. It's not the same exact character that we know and love. Of course, they have elements of that character, and they don't do anything to desecrate the remains of that character, but what they all have in common is that they all had these comparable filmmakers take these characters, take these stories, give it a fresh pair of eyes, and give us a new interpretation of these characters. I don't want a direct adaptation of a comic book story or a character. I don't necessarily want that. I've seen that already. I've read that. I want something new. I want creative people to be creative, and I want them to give me a fresh version of this character. Now, if you look at it, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, for instance, his Joker, along with Heath Ledger's Joker, they're all up on the same pedestal with the Mark Hamill's, with the comic book Jokers, the different variations in the comics. They all are at the same level now because competent filmmakers were able to come in and do something creative and weren't given restrictions by the studio. They just had an idea, they had a plan, and they executed it without any kind of interference, with really talented actors and writers and cinematographers, and they were able to create something special. And to me, that's why movies like The Joker or like Dark Knight are going to stand the test of time, because they are not your typical superhero movie. These movies, a lot of times, especially those two that I just mentioned, they would be good even if the comic book element wasn't there. Like, they're good movies first that just happen to have comic book characters in them. Like, if you take Batman out of The Dark Knight, it's still a really good movie. If you take the character of Joker out of the movie and just watch it as a character study, it's still going to be a great movie. Now, it's to a lesser extent with the X-Men, because you would have to have the comic book element no matter what. But it is still a interpretation of those characters. It is not a direct adaptation from the comics. And a lot of people are upset by that. You have your traditionalists who want everything exactly like it is in the comics. And to me, that's just boring. I don't see any cinematic value to that. I don't see anything creatively that piques my interest. That doesn't pique my interest at all. Like, that just makes me forget the movie the instant I see it, because it's like, oh, okay, it's just another movie about this guy, and then we'll move on. Like when you constantly keep remaking Spider-Man, but you don't do anything new with the character, that sort of thing. Like, that is the kind of thing that I think we need to get away from. That's the kind of thing that I think, this is why I think superhero movies can learn a thing or two from movies like X-Men and all the other movies that I mentioned. So let me know in the comments down below if you understand what I'm saying, or if you agree, if you disagree. I'd be interested to have a conversation with all of you about this. As always, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you next time right here on Real Shift. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Peace out.